I'll just wait a couple of seconds until we see the numbers reach what our registrations were, and it's getting close. And then we'll get started on this beautiful day. So good afternoon and welcome to another Nanaimo Chamber virtual event. This is held on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the Nanaimo, Snanas, and Suminas. And in March of 2020, Nanaimo Community Foundation launched the Community Response Fund to support urgent needs due to the pandemic. We'll hear about the success of that program in a few minutes. We'll also hear about Vital Signs. Vital Signs is a periodic community checkup conducted by foundations that measures the vitality of communities. Here to do that, we have Dr. David Witty. He has served as the Nanaimo Foundation Grants Director since 2019. Prior to his retirement as Provost and Vice President Academic at Vancouver Island University, Dave was Dean, Faculty of Architecture, University of Manitoba, 2001 to 2009. And prior to that, a Director and Partner in Urban Systems Limited. Before moving to BC in 1991, Dave was Senior Partner in Hilderman, Witty and Associates, an award-winning planning and landscape architecture practice based in Winnipeg and Saskatoon. Laurie Bienert is also here to help Dave. And Laurie is the Executive Director of the Nanaimo Foundation. Laurie is the President of the Rotary Club of Nanaimo and former President of the Young Professionals of Nanaimo. In 2017, she was a recipient of Vancouver Island's Top 20 Under 40 Business and Community Achievement Award. Laurie also volunteers as a Nanaimo Chamber Ambassador. Take it away, Dave and Laurie, and I will mute. And for those in the audience, if you would like to pose any questions in the chat box, and we'll take care of those at the end of the meeting so that these guys can continue unfettered. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kim. It's great to be here, and so we are remote. I'm actually in Campbell River. Just telling Kim that staying, if anybody stayed at Dolphins Resort, so hanging our hat here for a few days of hiking in Elk Island, or yeah, a provincial park. Anyways, it's all called something Elk Provincial Park outside of Campbell River here. So Laurie, you were going to put up a couple of slides as I introduce this. So some of you may know that I do have experience with the Chamber as well, and I had the privilege of, when I first came to Nanaimo on the role of Provost, that replaced Ralph Nilsson on the Chamber board for a number of years, and I'm actually the Chamber's nominee to the Airport Commission, where I'm now actually chair. So certainly stay in touch with the Chamber, and as some of you know, we do the presentation a couple of times a year. We do a presentation back to the Chamber on the airport. So for me, foundations are really quite interesting, and so I really got personally involved initially. Bowen Island had a foundation, and it was just getting started. So I, like all things, got involved with that when I was living on Bowen Island, and I found it, fascinating. I knew a bit about it from my days in Winnipeg with the Winnipeg Foundation. Talk about that in a minute. But so on Bowen Island Foundation, we started it up, and in 2015, my wife Marg died, and I thought, she had been really involved in the community, and how can we recognize her contribution to Bowen Island? And I thought, well, obviously, the foundation. So my sons and I created a bursary in her name for Island Pacific School, which is a non-religious independent school, highly regarded school, and actually private school in British Columbia. And she was an early chair of that and helped grow that organization. And as a result, she really had a role there. And so we created an endowed fund in her name. And that's really something foundations just do a wonderful job of, and that, if there's somebody that you want to recognize or a group that you want to support, foundations are the place, in my view, where you dedicate funding. They manage the funding in perpetuity, and a down fund then allows, in her name, for instance, and Bowen to spin off $3,000 a year to a bursary fund, and that continues to grow, actually. So So you're going to have to bear with me here because I'm working on a number of devices, and so I'm just going to refer to my notes here. The Nanaimo Foundation is clearly a really important organization, and we'll talk a little more about it in a moment, but we really see it as your foundation, and that's why we want to have a chat today about that. Next slide, please. There are 191 foundations in Canada. The first foundation started in 1921, so 100 years ago now, obviously, in Winnipeg, and that foundation now has, and I just Googled it the other day, $1.4 billion in assets, and generated last year $73 million worth of grants into the city, into various organizations through endowed funds and that sort of thing. There are, of the 191 foundations in Canada, 49 are in BC. So foundations in BC are really quite a significant community initiative. Vancouver City obviously is the largest one with $1 billion in assets. And they provided, in the years that it's been formed, $1 billion of grants. So quite significant. In our own case, Laurie was hired in 2015 as our first staff person after 33 years of the Nanaimo Foundation actually being in existence. And in that period of time, it's given out money, but really grown in the last few years because we've restructured the board. And over the last 6 years, we've dispersed on average $500,000 a year. And that probably flies under most of your radar, actually. And so that's one of the reasons we wanted to speak to you today. So we've provided in 2020 an outstanding number, and that was more than $1 million in grants because of COVID and some of the initiatives that we undertook. Laurie.
Sorry, thank you, Dave. So Nanaimo Foundation serves 5 communities on Nanaimo, Stuminas, and Saunaus land, or as we know them as Ladysmith, Cedar, Nanaimo, Gabriel Island, and Lanceville. So we have the same catchment region as Ladysmith Nanaimo Schools Foundation. Of the 5 communities that we serve, 2 communities have established their own dedicated community funds. It was the goal of a former Governor General of Canada that every community in Canada have access to a community foundation. And the Community Foundations of Canada work with communities across the country to work towards that goal. And so individuals in Ladysmith and on Gabriel Island wanted to establish their own community foundation. But then they came to the realization that they were under our umbrella. And we have provided grants to those communities since our establishment over 39 years ago. And so we've worked with people in those communities to help grow their own community funds that act like their own community foundations, but we handle the administration for them. So I'm going to do a bit of a Nanaimo Foundation 101. We have 3 buckets of work as a community foundation. Our first is to make meaningful and lasting impacts in our community. Secondly, we support our local charitable sector. And thirdly, we help donors simplify and enhance their charitable giving, both in their communities and across the country. So I'm going to elaborate on each one of these. So starting with making meaningful and lasting impacts in our community. We steward gifts to build permanent endowment funds to address the current and future needs of our communities. As Dave mentioned, we build endowment funds, and so these are income earning endowment funds, and the earnings off of these funds are used to make strategic grants. So we have what's called our Vital Fund, and that's the fund from which we make annual grants to provide funds to local charities. But we also understand these last 15 months more than ever, understand the need to be responsive and nimble. And so and that was why in March of 2020, we established the Community Response Fund together with generous donors of Nanaimo Foundation. So Dave's going to cover more details about our Community Response Fund in a little bit here. So the third area of our work, supporting our local charitable sector. I mentioned our Vital Fund, and so organizations, any charitable organizations within our catchment region can apply each year to receive grants from our Vital Fund. And our Grants Advisory Committee and Board of Directors advises on the grants from that fund and selects grant recipients each year. And as a community foundation, we are not focused on one specific area. We support all areas of the community. So whether it's social services, arts and culture, sports and recreation, environment, animal welfare, the entire range of the community, we provide grants to address needs in all areas of the community. Another way that we work with and support our charitable sector is in helping organizations build their own endowment funds. Many charitable organizations see the value in establishing their own endowment funds because this creates a source of permanent income for them in perpetuity. And undertaking an endowment fund can be a bit daunting for a charitable organization that is already stretched to the max, and most local organizations, they're working long hours just to address their needs and their programming. And so when we work with organizations to build their own agency endowment funds, we take all of the administrative work on. We handle all of the filings with the CRA, ensuring compliance with BC Societies Acts, and we work with our investment managers to make sure that their funds are getting the maximum earnings. And then we just write those organizations checks for the earnings of their funds, either once a year or 4 times a year, as per their wishes. So the third area of our work is working with donors to simplify and enhance their charitable giving locally and across Canada. As most charitable organizations know, donors are becoming more sophisticated with their charitable giving. They are looking into all the different ways to provide maximum charitable benefit to areas in which they are passionate about while receiving maximum tax benefits. There are more ways to make a charitable donation than simply writing a check. Of course, in 2006, when the federal government started permitting gifts of publicly traded securities, and in terms of they were always permitted, but at that point, the federal government eliminated donors to having to pay capital gains on publicly traded securities that were gifted to a charity. And in that month, I think there was like $500 million in charitable securities donated across the country because gifts of securities provide the best tax benefits to donors. Gifts of life insurance, charitable remainder trusts. There are multiple ways in which donors can support causes they are passionate about. And so we work with donors to help reach their philanthropic goals. One of those ways is we work with donors to establish funds at Nanaimo Foundation that act like private family foundations, which Dave shared his family's foundation at the Bowen Island Foundation. Donor advised funds act just like family foundations, just like private family foundations. But again, Nanaimo Foundation takes on all of the administration. There's a lot of work involved in establishing a charity and then overseeing that charity each year. Private family foundations would have to do an annual financial review or audit each year with independent accountants, file a T3020 with 3010 with the federal government, as well as ensure that they are constantly complying with the BC Societies Act. So as a community foundation, we take on all of that work. We know what the federal government requires. We know what the BC Societies Act requires. We stay abreast of all of the changes in both of those areas. And so donors can have the benefits and the pleasure of directing grants from their fund and selecting where the support from their fund is headed to. And we take care of all of the administration. So we work with both individuals and businesses who have established their own funds at Nanaimo Foundation. An example is we have two funds in honor of the late Tom Harris. Tom Harris was on our board when he sadly passed away 4 years ago, and he was our longest running board member at that time. So both his family as well as Tom Harris Cellular established two funds in Tom's name. Another example is the Stanley DeVos Fund. And this is a great story because they're two individuals, longtime Nanaimoites, that are passionate about environmental issues in our community. So they initially established their fund to address environmental causes. But with the donor advised fund, the donors have the flexibility year over year to decide where grants are directed from their fund. And so shortly after they established their fund, they became acquainted with a few organizations that were addressing food security in our community. And so for multiple years, grants from their fund went towards organizations like the 710 Club, rather than addressing their initial intentions of environmental needs. And so the advantage of those donor advised funds provides that flexibility. Another option that we provide to donors is what we call building block funds. So for younger professionals or individuals who are not quite at the point where they want to or they have the capacity to establish a larger donor advised fund, donors can work towards that. So by gifting $500 or $1,000 each year and deciding whether that is all placed in a permanent endowment fund or a part of it is placed in a permanent endowment fund and a part of it is dispersed to the community. And a lot of individuals like to involve their children in their charitable giving. So for younger professionals with younger children, they establish these building block funds and to help educate their children about philanthropy. And for donors who are at the point where they want to create those larger funds and build that family legacy, many of our donors and fund founders involve their children and their grandchildren. The Johnston Family Fund, for example, they decide as a family over Thanksgiving dinner each year. The children, the grandchildren, and the grandparents each get to select grants from their fund, and then we disperse those from the Johnston Family Fund. So each one of our funds is unique. There are no two funds that are the same at our foundation, and that's because we work with donors to tailor their funds to meet their wishes. And now I'll pass it back to Dave to talk more about our Community Response Fund.
Thanks, Laurie. Just, a couple of minutes to talk about our Community Response Fund. On March 26 last year, 15 days after coronavirus pandemic was declared, we created the Nanaimo Foundation Community Response Fund and launched it with $100,000. That was composed of money from an anonymous donor and $50,000 contribution from the Tom Harris Community Foundation Fund that we hold. And then, so over the last 15 months, thousands of donors, local businesses, community partners have got together and made contributions to our Community Response Fund to help those who have been detrimentally impacted by COVID. So that funding, combined with the federal government's Emergency Community Support Fund, enabled us to disperse $700,000 in COVID relief grants, a significant amount of money. When we launched last year in March, we knew that that really a key issue was food insecurity. And as a result, we dispersed $250,000 to provide food security for the vulnerable community members that we have. We also provided funding for a number of different programs. For instance, Telecom Laylam Aboriginal Society, they were providing food hampers to families in our Nanaimo community, and so they were actually providing food supplies to over 250 families, and affecting 1,000 individuals each time they delivered. So we were supporting them in their efforts as well. Later on, Laurie's going to talk about our vital signs report, which is a key part of our presentation today. But we know through that report that just over 22% of the children and youth in Nanaimo were living in poverty and live in poverty. And so we were supporting organizations such as the Nanaimo Youth Services Association. And we did that because we're able to respond quickly in raising the money, but we're also equally able to respond quickly in linking to those who are delivering on the ground. And so now we make decisions really quite rapidly. And in that instance, we provided the NYSA with in support of their food hamper program. Other priority areas related to some of the closures that happened as a result of COVID and the public health orders that really changed the environment for a lot of people and the way they lived. And so many seniors, vulnerable seniors were affected, particularly in regard to how they became isolated. So we were providing supports to those types of groups as well. And we actually have a video later, a short video we're going to show you that covers some of those topics. So over to you, Laurie, with our vital signs report, please.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you. So vital signs. So vital signs report is a community checkup conducted by community foundations across Canada, which allows us to measure the vitality of our community and understand trends across a range of local issues. We at Nanaimo Foundation, we release a vital signs report every 3 years. Our last report was released in the fall of 2019. And so it positioned us well, just prior to the pandemic. Obviously we don't have a crystal ball. We didn't predict the pandemic, but we knew the needs of our community at that point in time. And so when the pandemic hit, we knew those needs would be exacerbated, and it positioned us well to respond quickly at the beginning and throughout the pandemic. Of the 191 community foundations in Canada, Nanaimo Foundation was one of 26 foundations to release a report in 2019. And so we use this as a resource, but we also invite everyone in the community and other organizations, businesses, community leaders to use it as a resource and a tool as well. The Vital Signs report takes a dive looking at the current well-being of our community across 10 issue areas. So these 10 issue areas on the screen. It compiles the most recent local data and research. So I'm going to show I'm going to show just a few highlights from the report. You'll note that some of the dates on the report seem dated, but it is truly the most recent available data. We use the long form census data to develop this report, and as well as other sources. The creation of this report involved a review of 174 pieces of data and 228 source documents, as well as a review of trends over time and community comparisons with each piece of data. So it's a compilation of a lot of data points. You can download the finished report from our website. And you can also view the technical report with all 228 source documents on our website. We have the full report on there. And when we were, collecting all of this data and deciding what is the story that we want to tell, what is the narrative that we are going to share with this report, we worked with other community partners to pull that together. And, when you look at one of the data points I'll share about bullying, do we talk about students who don't feel bullied or students who do feel bullied? And what is that story? And so that's an important conversation for us to be having, because the report is a tool in addition to providing opportunities for action. So the report starts with a snapshot of our population and how it's changed. So when we look at migration from other parts of Canada and other parts of BC, it's interesting because there's a lot of anecdotal information in our community, like every community, of course. And so, how are the population changes in Greater Nanaimo? What is driving that? Is it people immigrating from other countries, or is it migration from other parts of Canada and other parts of BC? So this shows, of course, 2 of the past 5 years, migration from other parts of Canada was the main contributor to population growth, and particularly other parts of BC, which I think would come as no surprise to many Nanaimoites. The report also shares a snapshot. If Greater Nanaimo was a village of 100 people, what would that look like? So this just shows it's a simplified version of what our community looks like. And so, people who identify as male and female, it's pretty evenly split. The ages, the median age in our community is approximately 46 years, which, the age data surprised a lot of people, in that many, more people thought that it would be a higher percentage in the 60 plus range. And then when we look at, people who've completed high school, people who have a high school diploma, or a post-secondary degree, and crime rate is a big issue in our community, which I'll share more specific data on that. But as before I go into some of the specific data points, I'll share with you that, so when we released this report in late 2019, we delivered many presentations on the vital signs report to various groups and organizations, city council, and we would put together a quiz. So we would share the data point with multiple choice. What do you think is the correct information related to this, crime rate or population, or whatever it was? And like I mentioned, everybody has their anecdotal information on their community. People know their community, but in fact, participants across all of our presentations, nobody scored higher than 50% on the quizzes. So this really goes to show the importance of this report, and that knowing the actual factual data is very important, because that helps us direct our support and helps donors direct support. So let's look at the gap between the rich and the poor. As Dave mentioned, over 22% of the youth in Greater Nanaimo are living in poverty. This was pre-pandemic. And so it's a sad news story. The good news is it's going in the right direction. However, seniors, the number of seniors living in poverty is increasing, which contradicts, this is in contradiction to data across the country. The federal government and provincial governments are providing a lot of supports to ensure that seniors are not living in poverty, but in our community, in our backyards, it's going in the wrong direction. And we have certainly seen that increase during the pandemic, which was one of the reasons why we directed community response and support towards helping seniors and housing. We're often asked, what is the definition of poverty? What's the poverty line? And so it changes over time. And in fact, the federal government changed it again shortly after we released this report. Basically, it's how that is defined as the cost of a basket of goods. And so it's a basket of goods of things of sort of life necessities and what those cost. And then with people's income, can they afford that? And so the federal government can change. They look at what is that basket of goods. So things like access to internet was recently added to that basket of goods, and so it changed the cost, and therefore the number of people who were and were not living in poverty. So looking at another issue, housing, which has become just more of a conversation topic in our community. So we're going to, I'm sure, see some big changes when we release the report next year. But this I'm sure does not come as too much of a surprise to many that there was a 58.6 increase from May 2015 to May 2019 in single family house benchmark prices. And then when we look at apartments, very similar. So we know that housing is a crisis across our country and particularly in our community. Economy. So this is the top 10, sorry about that, top 10 employers in 2018. And I don't think too many people would be surprised that these are the top 10 employers. But when we look at these employers, it's important to think about, okay, well, what types of employers are these? All of these employers are service industries, not goods. And so is that a healthy economy? When we think about, like, again, with the pandemic, with Canada being able to, our own supply chain and producing our own vaccines. The federal government, of course, now has provided, I think it was close, I can't remember the amount, I don't want to be quoted on it, but of course we now Canada has its own vaccine production in Eastern Canada. But when we look at our own community, these are all service industries and not goods. And so that my question to you is that a healthy economy to you? The environment. And so the environment, we have a bit of a good news and bad news. So good news, water usage, a huge decrease in water consumption, 15% decrease despite the population going up by 16%. So that's wonderful to see. Especially, we all love our beautiful yards and whatnot, but that this is, really this is the community leaning in and making sure that they're doing their part to decrease water consumption. However, when we look at solid waste, huge increases in solid waste and recycling per household. And when we got this data, so to collect all of this data, we contract an organization called the Social Planning and Research Council of BC, and they help us collect all of this data and sift through all of the source documents, and so that we are making sure that we are providing accurate information. And this one was really surprising to us. So I actually reached out to the city and the waste department of the city to verify this information, and they indeed verified it. There was, talk about, is this due to secondary suites? And it had nothing to do with that. It was a true increase in garbage consumption per household. So we're hoping that since we've released this report, that the community can again do their part, like we all did with water consumption, and drive those numbers down. When we released this report, we encourage people to read the report, reflect on the data, and decide for themselves what this means for our community and for our future. And throughout the report, we saw a need for more support for our youth. Again, 22.1% of youth living in poverty. Our high school completion rates for all students throughout the Nanaimo Ladysmith School District, 71.1%. For Aboriginal students, that's a really low number. 62.5% of all students across our school district are graduating. And then 30% of students don't feel welcome at school. That's a very high number. And so clearly there needs to be more done to support our youth, our children and youth. So shortly after this report was released in 2019, concerned individuals came together and created the Youth Fund at Nanaimo Foundation. They wanted a fund that is forever dedicated towards supporting youth in our community and moving the dial on some of the issues raised in the vital signs report. And so that was great to see, and that fund has continued to grow and has supported youth throughout the pandemic with things like the Nanaimo Youth Services food program that Dave spoke about. So our next report will be released in the fall of 2022. Of course, this will be well-timed as our community, like every community across the country, is striving to recover from the pandemic. And it will be very important for us to understand the needs of our community at that time and make effective calls to action based on the data, not just on what the perceived data is. So Dave, I'll pass it back to you. I'll stop sharing my screen and get the video ready here.
Okay, thanks. Kim, how are we doing for time?
We've got a good 15 minutes to go, sir.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll put on the video, and as Laurie sets that up, one of the really key things to understand about the Vital Signs report is that we have a community engagement committee that advises us on granting their people across the community that are connected into organizations and provide us good advice. But they very much make those recommendations as we do on making use of the Vital Signs report. So it's really a handy tool. So we're going to show you a video. Laurie, are you able to pull it up?
I'm ready.
I'd square yeah.
I'd like to take a moment to say a huge thank you to the Nanaimo Foundation and to every single supporter who has donated to the Nanaimo Foundation this past year.
We're very, very grateful that during this very difficult time of the pandemic, the community was there to support us.
A big thank you to Nanaimo Foundation. We received money from the Community Response Fund and the Emergency Community Support Fund, and what a difference that's made.
I want to thank the Nanaimo Foundation and the Community Support Fund for the $34,200 we received in July.
Thank you so much to the Nanaimo Foundation for helping support household food security on Gabriola Island.
Thanks to the Nanaimo Foundation, Vancouver Island Regional Library was able to provide digital care packages to more than 700 individuals through the Viral Connects initiative.
Thanks to the donors of the Nanaimo Community Response Fund, our organization was able to move our hospital peer support program online.
Your donation to the Nanaimo Community Foundation enabled us to provide food hampers, gift cards, and activity kits to our families in need during COVID.
With the support of our amazing staff, volunteers, and our generous funders, including the Nanaimo Foundation, we were able to distribute over 20,000 good food boxes to Nanaimo and the surrounding community over the last year. That's over 240,000 pounds of food.
Thank you doesn't capture how grateful we are for the support of the Nanaimo Foundation, the Community Response Fund, and all of the donors who have contributed to our Food for Schools program, feeding hungry children across the district.
Thanks to you, we've been able to support over 500 families, including children, adults, and seniors, and have helped them to feel connected and like there is a blanket of support around each and every one of them.
We really saw how during COVID, our clients were becoming really isolated. And so receiving the money that we did really helped. We received a couple of different grants, and one of them was money to buy technology and also arts and crafts supplies provided for people who are stuck and in a place where they don't see hope. Just those little things, they really provided hope.
With the funds from the Nanaimo Foundation, we've been able to provide groceries such as these to some of our community members, as well as healthy meals. COVID-19 has definitely shown that there's a high need for these kinds of supports in our community. So being able to provide groceries that can be picked up, as well as delivered by volunteers, has been a huge help.
This year was a tough year at our school. We experienced a lot of heartbreak and hardship with the pandemic and with the engagement of students. And quite frankly, last spring, we didn't know how the community was going to respond to coming back to school, to re-engaging with other families. And so we had this vision of reconnecting and re-engaging learners, and that required some of the funding that you guys came through for us. And through the relief funding, we've found ways to create a space of belonging for every child that wanted to be here.
This was instrumental in helping us to increase our staffing capacity on the crisis line, as our volunteer pool was disappearing due to COVID restrictions. I just want to let you know what this money did for us. Last year, we answered 43,000 calls, chats, and texts. That was a 9% increase from the previous year. 10% of those calls had to do with COVID, were COVID related. We did 336 interventions to 911, 2,183 calls to mental health crisis services, which saved lives.
In total, the project provided 25 laptops, 15 streaming devices, and 14 smart TVs to residential care facilities, crisis care centers, halfway houses, and 2 drop-in youth centers. We helped seniors stay connected, we helped students complete their schooling, we bridged gaps and brought people closer.
We were able to buy iPads that we distributed to the social workers at Nanaimo Regional General Hospital, who then were able to connect isolated patients with family, friends, and our peer support workers. This has been incredibly important for patients who aren't able to see family and friends due to visitor restrictions at the hospital because of COVID.
We were able to, through this donation, upgrade our information systems, our computers, and provided an ability for our clients to reach us during a very vulnerable time in our history during the first wave of the pandemic.
We were able to provide a hamper program to feed approximately 1,200 students throughout the pandemic. Between March and September, there were approximately 10,000 food hampers that were built and provided to students from Ladysmith to Lanceville and everywhere in between.
Over the past year, with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen now more than ever that food security is essential in our community. As people were laid off from work and were staying at home, they needed fresh fruits and vegetables now more than ever.
Let me tell you about one family that we provided a Christmas hamper to. One of our young mums came to pick up her kids from our daycare, and she was just chatting to the staff, telling them how she really couldn't afford to go and buy a good Christmas dinner, because she was really struggling to pay her bills. But we already had a hamper ready for her due to the funding that we received from the Nanaimo Community Foundation. Everything she needed for her Christmas Day dinner was in a box, along with a gift card to allow her to supplement it to make sure that she met the needs of her family. She turned around and was handed this box by the staff member, and she burst into tears. She had no idea that we were going to provide that to her. So this is just one example of the impact that your dollars have had from the many, many families that we serve here at Boys and Girls Club. So on behalf of our families, thank you so much for your donation.
So what a difference that makes, and thanks to the donors of the Nanaimo Foundation.
And we did it with the generous support of the Nanaimo Foundation.
We're so grateful for the support of the Nanaimo Foundation.
We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you once again.
We truly couldn't do what we do without the generosity of all of you who have helped make this happen.
Thank you, friends. Nanaimo Squalaqua, our friends and family in Nanaimo. You've truly blessed us, and we will be grateful. So thank you so much to the donors, to the executive, and all of those that have supported us through this difficult but much better year because of our partnership together.
Your donations and support has made a difference.
Thank you for helping us help others.
So this video shows the power of a community when everyone comes together. As Dave mentioned, we were able to provide $700,000 in support in COVID relief funding. And those were gifts that ranged from $3 to $30,000. And it was the power of combining these gifts and amplifying each other. We're so proud as your community foundation to have worked alongside you in responding to this crisis. And out of this, we've launched the Give Where You Live Fund so that we can be continually responsive and nimble in addressing the needs of our community and supporting the greatest needs from Nanaimo, Ladysmith, Cedar, Gabriel Island, and Lanceville. And Dave, I'll pass it to you if there's anything further you want to add.
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. And I just wanted everybody to know that Zachary Tanner Pictures donated his time to put that video together for us. I think, as you can see, it's important work, and we need your support to continue that work. We're nimble, we're able to respond quickly, but we're also able to see long term. So we combine the immediate with the long term, and if any of you are interested in exploring endowed funds, give Laurie a chat, or immediate funding opportunities that you can identify and provide financial support for those as well. So we're always exploring new opportunities and new ways, and always looking for opportunities to partner with new people. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Kim, does anybody have any questions, or is there any questions in the chat?
There haven't been any questions come into the chat, Laurie. I've got a couple of my own,
Great.
But that's the first time I've seen that video, and it's great. It's just great. It expresses so much of how the community benefits, and there's so many people that we all know and are friends of in that video. So that was kind of remarkable too. Thanks so much for the work that the foundation has done. What's the best way for an interested party to give, or to get on a giving program with you?
The first step, depending on what they're interested in, give me a call. Call me, email me, Laurie@NanaimoFoundation.com, or give me a call. All of my coordinates are on our website, NanaimoFoundation.com. If donors are wanting to support our Give Where You Live Fund, we have all of that information on our website. A monthly gift of $10, $15, again, when combined with other monthly gifts of those amounts, goes a long way. But if donors are wanting to explore options about building their family legacy, or creating a family fund, or working towards that, happy to have all of those conversations and just provide information so that donors can make an informed decision on how they can best meet their philanthropic goals.
Are there still funds being distributed to the community for COVID related issues going forward now?
Great question, Dave. I'll leave that one to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kim. So when we built a strategy around the funds, and we were just so overwhelmed with the amount of funding we got, we realized that we should take a look at holding some funds back because COVID being COVID and changes occurring. So we did purposefully, and we're going to expend all of the money by the end of September. But we've got approximately $75,000. I think it's that we're looking to spend between now and then on items that have become apparent that need funding that hadn't been identified previously.
Question on vital signs. When will the data be collected locally to come up with the release of the fall 2022 vital signs?
So we're going to get the project underway in the fall, this fall. And we're looking at, we want to collect, of course, the long-form census data, but also just exploring other sources of data. So it's a long process, but we love hearing from people in the community stakeholders on ideas or, where we should be sourcing information. And so we'll be putting together our Vital Signs Committee. If you're interested in getting involved, reach out to me. And we'll be starting the process this fall and to be releasing the report in probably late October of 2022.
Of course, the Chamber will be interested in being involved once again. Concerning data there, of course, is the increase in poverty, especially among seniors in our community, which really pushes the homelessness envelope. As a member of the Mayor and Council's Task Force on Health and Housing, that was something that was quite remarkable to me, and not to be too surprised by it as our population ages and as our population does have a struggle with poverty in the entire community. It just becomes amplified as people get older and their opportunities become less, and they're faced with possible loss of a partner. So that's an area that I hope that the Community Foundation is continue to monitor and continue to pay attention to.
Agreed.
There being no further questions, I want to compliment you and extend that compliment to Zachary Tanner at Tanner Films for the wonderful video. And if there's no further questions from anybody and nothing's coming up in the chat box, you get an extra 6 minutes in your lunch and learn for actual lunch. So thanks very much for doing this, and thank you very much, David, for suggesting the idea. It was a great one.
Great. Okay, thanks, Kim. Take care.
Right.
Stay well.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you to the Chamber.
See you soon, Laurie.
Right.